Hi, I'm Ann Delisi.
And I'm Chef James Rigato.
And in episode 7 of Essential Cooking, we mark Julia Child's 108th birthday. We're going to start by talking about, I would call Julia Child an icon, right?
I think that's fair.
It's fair to call her that, yeah. So Julia Child would have been 108 years old tomorrow, so she's got a birthday tomorrow. And according to PBS, who ran her TV shows for a while, Julia Child revolutionized American cuisine through her French cooking school, award-winning cookbooks, and world-renowned television programs by presenting an approachable version of sophisticated French cooking to her eager audiences for decades. That's really what she really did. She made it
absolutely.
So unintimidating suddenly.
Well, I think there was also the book, which was, brilliant, but also the TV show too. So, it just was, 4 decades of just dominance in American kitchens.
It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. So Julia Child was 6 feet tall. She had kitchens that were made specifically to accommodate her height.
Yeah. So I think 6'2", right?
She's 6'2",
yeah.
6'2", yeah, right. Even more.
Yeah.
And she apparently played a lot of golf. And as they mentioned in the film, Julie and Julia, where Meryl Streep played her so brilliantly, she actually did do administrative work for spies. She was a patriot and she wanted to serve her country. And that's what she ended up doing, which is pretty crazy. So the first French meal she had was at a restaurant called La Couronne, and it was the oldest restaurant in France, and Julia Child has referred to it as the most important meal of her life, which begs the question for you.
Oh, wow, yeah.
What is the most important meal that you think you had that changed your life?
Well, when I was 21, I went to Charlie Trotter's in Chicago and got the full tasting menu and the beverage pairing and the full tour, and that was really the first time that I saw a meal, as a storytelling, and how wine connects. And it felt like that trip kind of around the world and the history of food, which obviously a lot of chefs attempt to do, but it was, it's your first time getting that kind of experience. So maybe I've had better physical meals, but you only get that like one first time, and I think that, for me, it was Charlie Trotter, definitely.
Do you remember what you ate that night?
I have the menu framed, so it's
really?
Definitely. But I just like the talent pool that he had in his kitchen was really impressive. A lot of chefs that have restaurants now, came to that kitchen.
Was John Vermiglio?
Well, Vermiglio was, he was not a chef in that kitchen. He was, I think he was a lowly commis. I think he did a lot of prep for the private catering and stuff. But John Shields, who's at Smith, which is one of the best restaurants in Chicago, was in that kitchen as well. So there's a lot of great chefs in Chicago still that came through Trotters.
That's pretty great. Well, Julia Child enrolled in a professional cooking school, Le Cordon Bleu, and she was completely out of place there, so it seems. All these chefs were there. I think it was all men, too.
Oh, for sure. Being an American and then being a woman, are, 2 strikes when you go over there as a chef in the 50s and 60s, I imagine.
So she goes through this school, and really she didn't know much about cooking before then. She was into her 30s, I think, by the time she actually went to this cooking school. And it changed her life. And the funny thing she said about this was, I found a real and satisfying profession which will keep me busy well into the year 2000. Which is just an incredible thing to hear her say then, that she knew decades later that this was going to be her life. And it actually did. She also didn't think she was going to make very much money. Apparently, she thought they were going to live really, really simply.
Yeah.
And her book was never going to go anywhere.
Yeah,
and
amazing.
So, which I think is so incredible. So she did do an incredible book.
Yeah, and Mastering the Art of French Cooking was published in 1961. And she'd worked on it for 9 years, which blew my mind to find out. That's
9 years.
It's a long time. But I guess it's proof that why it's still around. And she really, I think that's what was so great about her show, was that you kind of watched her make mistakes and kind of be silly. And it demystified cooking, but also made it feel approachable because she wasn't, so stern. It felt fun to watch her cook. And then she did a few revisions to the book, especially in 1983 with the food processor coming out. And then in 2003 for the 40th anniversary. But the food processor, she had to basically revisit the whole book because obviously you're not just using a knife now. Now you have an incredible tool, which obviously all chefs know as the RoboCoupe or as the food processor.
During our conversation, we also talked about Julia Child's television career and her relationship with Chef Jacques Pepin. And this is a quick clip of the famous theme song that she used. And this is pretty funny. As James mentioned, she was really quite casual about being, and didn't take this too seriously. She wasn't too fussy about anything. And this is just a quick clip to give you an idea of what some of those shows sounded like.
Black perspectives haven't always been centered in the telling of America's story. Now, we're taking center stage. Introducing NPR's Black Stories, Black Truths, a collection of Black-led stories from NPR's podcasts. Search NPR Black Stories, Black Truths wherever you get your podcasts.
Like,
we're roasting this chicken. Now, one thing I think a lot of people are just so scared of any recipe they see that says sugar syrup or caramel. They think, no, I won't do anything like that. For instance, you've got to have developed what the French call je m'en foutisme, or I don't care what happens. The sky can fall and omelets can go all over the stove. I'm going to learn. I shall overcome that sort of woman's liberation and, I mean, everything like that. If you're not going to be ready to fail, you're not going to learn how to cook. That's what that little lecture is all about. Bon appetit.
so there is. She's so great.
So perfect.
She's so great. So Julia Child was born tomorrow in 1912.
Yeah.
And
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to Julia Child. So we're going to talk a little bit more about her. So she was a knife freak. She had tons of them. They determined that she had so many knives and she had used them all, and she loved to have like big things.
Yeah.
She was a big person, I guess. She wanted to have like big things, which I thought was so incredible. But one of the things that I wanted to talk with you, James, is about her incredible relationship with Jacques Pepin, who you are a huge fan of.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Julia Child is amazing, but for me, even today, I really follow Jacques Pepin in his videos and his books and everything he's done. I mean, there's a reason why he appears in like every season of Top Chef as a judge, and I can tell you that on the show that's the one judge that everyone kind of is so excited for, but also dreads, because if you disappoint Jacques Pepin, it's like you just.
Did you get to meet him when you
No,
were
I didn't. I was already kicked off.
You were off
I
the
wasn't
show.
good enough to meet him. But I mean, honestly, I'm grateful, because had I disappointed him, I don't think I'd be over it still. He's just, and he's so sweet. I do have a print of one of his paintings, because he does paintings now as he gets older.
Right.
But yeah, if you ever need to know anything about cooking, I suggest Googling Jacques Pepin and whatever term you're looking for, artichokes, butchery, whatever it is. Look up anything Jacques Pepin does, and you'll find success.
Why is he so good?
You know, he's just never stopped. I mean, he grew up in kitchens, and he's always wanted to be transparent and open to the public. He's never been like a secretive person. He's always been, obviously that was his partnership with Julia Child. They're very similar, but I mean, he's just been in front of an audience making food and demystifying for decades. And he has a book, The Apprentice. Not the TV show. This is obviously before that, but it's like a memoir, which is fantastic. So yeah, he's just all been about the real craft of cooking and opening doors for people and showing you how to break down an artichoke the proper way. And he's a saint. He's a patron saint of food.
Well, he met Julia Child, and they met in France, and she was, I think, about 20 years older than he was at the time. And they both sort of spoke the same language, but
definitely.
he talks about how they used to fight and like not talk for a couple days because they would argue about things. And when you watch them on television, you can tell that she's like the boss. She's kind of like telling him all the things that she wants to do and everything. And he talked about how she never catered to the sponsors. And he tells a story about one time Land O'Lakes was the sponsor, so they were going to make like a galette, and then they were going to, he said, well, I'm going to use the extra dough and I'll make like a chicken pot pie or whatever. And she's like, okay, but I want to make my own dough. And he's like, all right. So this is 5 minutes before they go on the air, and Land O'Lakes is the sponsor, and she goes to make her dough, and she says, I'm going to use Crisco.
yeah, great job.
He said she would just not kowtow to the sponsors at all. And she's like, I'm using Crisco. And that's what she ended up using. And so I have this little clip that just really, it's a typical show with Jacques Pepin and Julia Child, and just to show this incredible relationship that went on for years and what they sounded like working together.
Now we're going to do a wonderful Mediterranean-type fish soup. And this is the kind of a soup that you would make anywhere in the country, even in Kansas City. And so any place that you can get some fish, or you can even make it and put potatoes in rather than fish. It's the principle that counts.
Even with salmon, right?
Yes, because we happen to have some.
So we start with olive oil on that one.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So some scallion.
Scallions aren't usual in a traditional soup like this, but you don't need to be traditional.
No.
The thing is to make a
Here we
wonderful
are.
soup.
We will put some onion, garlic
we
in
have-
there.
And proportions aren't very important either. That's probably about half a big onion And here's some garlic.
I'll
Just
chop.
as we're beginning to smell Mediterranean, it smells like the streets of Marseille.
Well, I'm going to cut some tomato for you there. And
You're
on
not
that.
going to seed them or anything.
No, I wouldn't.
So that's what it sounded like when the two of them cooked together. They were just like simpatico, and watching them together was really beautiful.
Yeah, I always think of him on TV and his voice. It reminds me of almost like Bob Ross. I kind of like, if I need to like, not stress or get some sleep and I'm all wound up, I'll put on Jacques Pepin videos and just like, it's just so therapeutic.
Well, that
He's the
voice,
Bob
of
Ross
course.
of cooking.
It's about Ross of cooking. Yeah. So we have a few quotes from Julie Child that we wanted to read to you. This is one of the quotes. She said, "I was 32 when I started cooking. Up until then, I just ate." Not a bad way to go.
Yeah, she says it's so beautifully arranged on the plate, someone's fingers have been all over it.
Some people like to build boats in the basement. I like to do things to food.
And being tall is an advantage, especially in business. People will always remember you. And if you're in a crowd, you'll always have some clean air to breathe.
I just love her. So anyway, happy birthday, Julia Child. Julia Child's curiosity and love of food still permeates the culinary world and home cooks alike.
We would like to thank La Marca Prosecco for their support. From the hills of Veneto, Italy, you can never go wrong with Prosecco, whether it's in a spritz or drinking straight.
We'd also like to thank you for listening. Joan Isabella is our executive producer. Associate producers are Lisa Brancato and David Lyons. Production provided by Studios on the Pond and Rowan Nemisto. Original music by the Mallet Brothers. This is a production of Detroit Public Radio Station, WDET.
Subscribe on your favorite podcast app and join us as we explore the world of food and how to cook it right here on Essential Cooking.